But there were some other things that I picked up, like Kellogg's were doing a 2-for-1 promotion, but actually this was locking out a lot of people on low incomes who
Okay.
didn't want to buy 2 packets of cereal at one time and in fact couldn't afford it in their weekly budget. So I said, you really need to think about promotional mechanics that work for those people, because those people are actually furious that they can't buy a branded cereal.
Tessa is our next speaker. And Tessa Stuart is somebody that I met online. Tessa, I think, is the only way I can describe it, actually. So we,
It wasn't Hinge. It wasn't Hinge.
it was all very above board, actually. Tessa and I met on LinkedIn. I don't know how long ago it is. Must be 10 years ago. You kind of gravitate towards people that that work in the same area as you, or people who you feel have something in common with you. And Tessa was one of those people. In fact, I bought her books. There were some of the first books I bought when I set up my business. One is called Packed, and one is called Flying Off the Shelves. And why is that? Well, they're excellent. So Tessa is a stalker. So as well as meeting people online, she also stalks people in supermarkets. And Tessa, I'm going to throw it over to you now to explain to us, please, what is a supermarket stalker and what you do?
So I work with lots of food and drink companies, predominantly challenger brands, but also Unilever, Kellogg's, Oatly, who I think probably still a challenger brand, and lots of others, to go into supermarkets and do two things. One is look at how their products are performing on the shelf as shoppers are approaching the shelves to buy them. So it's a little bit of stalkering. Are people looking at their products? Are they getting attention? And then I go in there. If they pick them up and they buy them, I'm there to swoop in and find out what was it that made them buy them. Or equally, what was it that made their eyes pass over the product and go to a competitor? So I will do 40 or 50, or sometimes, in the case of Kellogg's, 120 interviews in the aisle, talking to a range of people in a category that the client chooses. So it might be people who buy competitors, or it might be heavy users of the product, or people who just shop the category. And then there will be questions that they have asked me to find out the answers to. And so I will supply those answers and a course of action, which might be things like altering their promotional strategy. It might be tweaking things on their packaging. It might be discovering there's an ingredient in there that consumers aren't really familiar with and perhaps, need clarification. It could be a health claim that is important to consumers that maybe they're looking for. It could be clarification of something on pack. So I also do power hours where I talk to smaller brands, and we spend an hour together going through the pack messaging. So not the kind of specific labeling, but actually what are they saying to consumers? What are their claims? How many do they need on pack? And how can they make those stand out? What is the relevant order? How do consumers decode pack messages?
It's great because, if you're even to go back to something as simple as the USP again, if you've got a product or a food product that is maybe not hugely different to a lot of ones that are out there, maybe the way it's presented, maybe the way that pack is developed and that pack messaging could be that hook to get somebody to buy it. And that even could be something like, and we'll talk about this actually with Maria later on, it's something like a QR code that's going to bring them to more information that they're looking for in a particular pack. I believe there was some research done saying that people scan supermarket shelves something like 7 meters a second or something like a cyborg, just flying across the shelf and trying to, something has to jump out. So how does that, what you do, help the food brands understand consumers?
Well, basically, they might have a very specific question. So Kellogg's came to me and said, Kellogg's have all the data in the world. And my question to them was, why do you want me to do anything? Surely you know everything. And they said, well, actually, we don't. We are losing cereal sales, but they're not going to own label, the own brand of the retailer. We don't know what shoppers are doing. Now, it didn't take 2 minutes for me to arrive at the Tesco that they sent me to in Crewe, which is kind of in the middle of England, and realize that there was an Aldi on the roundabout, 2 steps away from the Tesco. And obviously, Aldi and Lidl, the discounters, have literally taken the market by storm. But Kellogg's weren't monitoring cereal sales in those places.
Okay.
So all the shoppers said to me, well, I'm not buying Kellogg's, I'm buying Aldi and Lidl because I'm sure they're made by Kellogg's anyway. So that is where that was going. And that was a huge and vociferous trend. So I went back to Kellogg's and said, basically, have you looked at the discounted share of market in cereal? Which is so obvious, which is what you would think. I mean, actually, pretty much you could work that out without 120 interviews. But there were some other things that I picked up, like Kellogg's were doing a 2-for-1 promotion, but actually this was looking at a lot of people on low incomes who
Okay.
didn't want to buy 2 packets of cereal at one time and in fact couldn't afford it in their weekly budget. So I said, you really need to think about promotional mechanics that work for those people, because those people are actually furious that they can't buy a branded cereal.
And they want to buy
So
it. Key things. They're locking them out and then they probably won't buy it in the future either.
yeah, exactly. So they'd actually pissed people off, excuse my language, but they had really pissed consumers off. And, those consumers have gone somewhere else and weren't going to come back. So I think big brands can be really quite complacent in a way that challenger brands and startups often aren't, because they are closer to their markets. And
It's
that is
true.
what I would say to you. Stay close to your customer base, do some sampling in the stores that you're stocked in, keep your ears wide open, listen to what shoppers are saying to you. It might be about flavors, it might be about some of the messaging on your packaging that is confusing to them, that maybe they don't quite get it. And it is honestly the most useful way that you can do free research for yourself at no cost.
Absolutely. And one of the things I talk about in the book actually is about that, talking to your customers, listening to your customers all the time. Don't assume that you think you know best, because it's the people out there who are going to buy your foods. They're the ones that know best because they're the ones that spend their money. We have a question here for you, Tessa, actually from Anne Brooks. Is it true that if a consumer picks up a product to look at, they are 95% likely to buy it?
Well, actually, I do a lot of presentations at trade shows and feed and drink events. And I have a slide where I have a woman with a hand on a drinks product, but her eyes are looking somewhere else. And I always ask consumers, what do you think she bought? And she actually bought the one that she was looking at, not the one that she had her hand on. So if they pick up a product to look at it, then yes, they are interested, but you've still got quite a few hurdles to get them over before they will buy it, because it's risky. If it's a new product, it's really risky. And consumers, particularly in this cost of living crisis, the data shows that they're actually quite risk averse. And what they've done is they've stopped buying so many new products. So they've stayed with the tried and tested. And that is now only just changing, and people's repertoires are opening up again to try new products. So it's not a given until it's gone through the till, frankly, and it's in that consumer's basket.
Yeah, exactly. I remember actually Pauline Clark is here online, one of our attendees tonight. And Pauline's a food producer over in Dundalk, and I met her years ago actually through the Food Academy program. Pauline's business is called Cookie, K-O-O-K-E-E. Look out for it; she's a mighty woman. But I remember Pauline specifically, when she was doing her pitch to Musgraves, had a photograph of an aisle of shelf of an aisle, and she had photoshopped her product into it to show how it would look on the shelf in store. And I just thought that was a flippant stroke of genius. Now, I don't know if it was appreciated as much by the people we were presenting to at the time, but it was absolute genius. I thought it was really good from a consumer point of view, very strong. How will this pop on the shelf?
Absolutely. And I think most challenger brands will do that now when they're pitching to retailers. They will literally take photos or get their designer to pop it on a shelf to show the standout. It's really important. But you could
Really,
also add in some vox pops that you've maybe got from a market stall and add those into your pitch, where it's someone else who's tasted it and saying, yes, I would buy this, or I do buy this.
oh, that's a great idea, actually. So, should food brands do with packaging to help us stand out on shelf?
Don't put too many messages on it. It's really tempting to cram your entire origin story, all your sustainability credentials, absolutely everything on there. But I want you to turn it around and think, what does that consumer coming new to my product need to know? So what are the 3 things? And what consumers always ask themselves is, it's so obvious, but you'd be amazed, what is this product? What is it?
Yeah.
If it's something slightly unusual, what is it? What can it do for me? So consumers are very self-centered. They're not going to do you a favor and buy their product out of the goodness of their hearts. They're going to buy it because they believe in some way it's going to help them. So do you have a health credential? Do you look amazingly yummy? Have you come up with a new and really interesting kind of ingredient? Are you more ethical? So, is it those things? And the way to test that is to take your product to people who don't know you, not your family and friends, step away from them, but actually, do your market stall and ask people, what do they think it is? What are the most important aspects to that person? So that you really get a steer on that. And I go into this when I do power hours with people. I'm like, what are the key things that you need to say? And it shouldn't be more than 3 things. It really should be 3 things. And actually, the rest of it, if you have a good designer, and there are a lot of good affordable designers out there, they can imply a lot of it in the design work on the label,
Yeah, absolutely.
or in the packaging, but do not try to cram it all on, because what happens is consumers' eyes just glaze over and they move on because you've made it too hard.
It's too complicated. Actually, a
Yeah.
good example of one I saw recently, and their case study in the book is Be a Sol. So they make snacks, if you like, or I don't know how you call it, not exactly baked goodies, but from spent grains from the brewing industry. And they've launched a new range. They're in Aldi at the minute, actually, in packaging. I love their packaging. It's just a little bit different. It's not what you'd expect for kind of little snacks, little bites, but it definitely caught my attention. Of course, I bought 3 because one isn't enough. One of every flavor, why choose? So I think you're absolutely right but cramming too much information on there it just is confusing. Like, talk about that obviously in the book. I've got big flick of the book, a whole chapter on labeling and what you have to do legally, but then there's all the other stuff that you want to put on there that you to make sure the message that comes across. But as you say, not to completely baffle people with too much information. Final parting piece of advice, Tessa. What's your last tip?
I think I would say, and it follows on from what I've just said, simplify. So really hone down what makes your product different. Why should people buy it? Get that down into one thing and then basically amplify it. So when I worked with instant drinks, they were like, okay, let's simplify what we're about, which was little tasty drinks, never made from concentrate. And then we will amplify them.
Very good. Simplifying the messages was the key thing, picking out the core piece of information.
Yeah, lean right into your difference, like we heard that Moran's Mega Jam have done, using local producers, really leaning into that, really supporting, their suppliers and making them part of the story. So, what is your difference? Because actually there are so many Me Too products out there that don't really have a difference.
Yeah, absolutely. That's the thing is get that angle and make sure that you talk about it. And I love your point about not asking family and friends. I always do that to people. Family and friends, will tell you you're absolutely fantastic, or they'll tell you you're nothing at all. They'll undermine you because either way you can't get an objective opinion. You have to ask people who'll give you an objective opinion. It's the only way it's going to work. Strangers all the way. That's it. Tessa, thank you so much. A real pleasure having you all the way from the UK, all over there in Blighty. Really appreciate you. And I have to say, with Tessa and I have something else in common as well. We discovered just in the last year, we both love to go out swimming in the open water. So I swim in the sea and Tessa swims in the Serpentine. And that old joke, how do you know somebody is an open water swimmer? They tell you. Okay.
Yeah, well, if you hop on my Instagram, it's literally all swimming.
Tessa, thank you so much. Hopefully you can hang on and we'll have any more questions at the end.